Hey everybody, welcome back to Chicago Reacts. My name is Michael. I'm an actor here in the city of Chicago, and I'm joined by the ever-brilliant, the always talented, the one, the only.
It's gotta be Zach. Also an actor in Chicago. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Soon to be worldwide, ladies and gentlemen. Stay tuned for that. Guys, part 2. World War I, Oversimplified. Part 1 was great. If you happen to miss that, check out part 1 for sure.
I know.
Like the video if you like it. Subscribe if you haven't already done so and you happen to love it. Leave a comment and check out the description below, where you can get our personal links to our Instagrams with our projects, our Twitch channel, Chicago Plays, where we game, and our sister movies and television reaction channel. So check it out.
Let's see how this trench warfare goes, shall we?
All right.
With both sides stuck in a hard stalemate, they knew this war wasn't going to be about taking territory, but about simply wearing each other down. The Allies had plenty of men to expend from its overseas dominions, and the British also started a naval blockade, so Germany couldn't import stuff, like food. They wanted a long, grueling war, though, so they both thought of ways to break the deadlock on the Western Front. Idea number 1, new frontiers. When the war first broke out, Australia was quick to take German New Guinea. The Allies also quickly jumped on Germany's colonies in Africa, and particularly in German East Africa, locals were enlisted as soldiers and carriers by both sides, leading to a tragic loss of life for the native Africans.
I didn't even know there was an African presence in the First World War.
Yeah, we don't really talk about
we don't.
Though maybe that's... I wonder if that is a difference in, like, American history versus European history. Like, especially for a European audience, do you learn more about that in history? Because I feel like we don't.
Right. So yeah, to put it bluntly, ladies and gentlemen.
Like, okay, we got Archduke Franz Ferdinand, we got trench warfare.
I remember, like, the Western Front.
And then
Allies and powers.
And Serbia. And but we don't have, like... it doesn't really talk about how the colonies affected it. Yeah,
there have been a surprising number of battles and conflicts fought in Africa that just is not at all a part of United States history, even really military history. Like, there are a lot of veterans out there who have done time in Africa fighting some sort of conflict that was secondary to, like, the Cold War or to Vietnam, or that just are never discussed. Ever. And it's a real disservice and dishonor to the people who have done their time there. So change it.
Well, and I'm curious because, like, at that time, like, that was considered part of, like, the UK's empire, the British Empire, and, like, all these countries, like, it was a colony, it was part of their empire. Whereas, like, the U.S. has colonized in different ways without it being part of our empire. Like, it's interesting, that difference in how that affects your history, or how you view your history. So I'm just curious. Let us know in that comment section down below. We'd love to know about it.
New combatants entered the war as well. The Allies' new friends were Italy and Japan. Japan was busy building itself an empire, so it was more than happy to take away German islands and colonies in East Asia. Italy actually had an alliance with Germany and Austria-Hungary before the war, but after some tense relations, the Allies promising to give them some of Austria-Hungary's stuff, they switched sides.
What?
Italy opened up in the mountains here, but like everyone else, they were stuck in stalemate for most of the war. The Central Powers' new friend was a struggling empire in the Middle East. The Ottomans... The Ottoman were divided on whether to actually join the war or not, since they had been exhausted by the recent Balkan Wars. Some of the politicians who did want to join went off on their own and fired some shells at Russia.
Is this when Istanbul becomes Constantinople? Or something like that, or vice versa?
I don't think so.
I'm curious. No, I'm getting a big no.
Okay, yeah.
And then came back and said, whoops, looks like we're at war now. The Ottoman entry into the war was of particular concern to the British, since the Middle East was full of oil, and Britain wanted all of that oil. First, the Ottomans tried to attack Russia in the Caucasus Mountains, but they weren't prepared for the cold, and many of them froze.
Wait, so the one thing that isn't clear, though, is what was the Ottoman Empire motivation to enter the war? Like, really, the only thing that was discussed was the kind of teeter-tottering. Like, some were for it, some were against it. I guess that wasn't very clear.
Well, they just fought a war, so they were hesitant at first.
Balkan, right.
But, I don't know, expand. They want to expand their empire.
Why can't you just be happy with your shit?
Then they crossed miles of desert to take the Suez Canal from the British.
All of human history is just a story of expansion.
I know, Michael.
People wanting more growth.
I know, Michael Hyatt.
But that failed too. Then the Allies tried to take the Dardanelles at Gallipoli in a long and hard trench warfare campaign, but that also failed. The Ottomans blamed their initial losses on the ethnic Armenians living within Ottoman territory, and the resulting Armenian genocide led to the deaths of 1.5 million people. Then the Germans sent spies into Afghanistan to try to convince the Arab tribes there to rise up in jihad against the British and attack India. But that plan failed, partly because the spies got bored, brewed their own alcohol, and got drunk, which is a bad thing to do in Afghanistan. All these new frontiers hadn't done much to change the war. Aware that the Allies had more men and supplies than them, the Germans knew they had to do something to break the stalemate. Before the war, there was a big conference that set out the rules of modern warfare. No chemical weapons, no killing civilians. Basically, don't be jerks. The Germans held a meeting and decided to be jerks. Zeppelin air raids commenced over British cities. They also started attacking the Allied trenches with chlorine gas, and they used submarines to sink civilian ships. One such civilian ship was the Lusitania, which had 159 Americans on board when it was sunk, further swaying U.S. opinion against the Germans. Not to be completely unfair,
someone's about to get liberated. America.
Chemical warfare soon after, and they had been hiding anti-submarine weapons on their civilian ships.
Oh,
which
man!
let the Germans justify their attacks. Meanwhile, Austria-Hungary still hadn't dealt with Serbia, so the Central Powers.
Man, there's so many fronts in this war.
So many fronts. I mean, this is insane. This is absolutely insane. And it's just like, I remember as a kid in middle school and in high school and stuff, reading about history and textbooks. And it's so like on the page, right? So to me, World War I, while it was, whatever, let's say 3 chapters worth of my history book, it was a singular event. You don't get any sense of scale whatsoever when you are reading about a war in a textbook. And even watching those old like history channel videos or stuff that they had us watch in class to like supplement learning, it just didn't give any sort of genuine feel for the true scope of what was going on and how many miles it expanded, how many countries, mindsets, cultures were represented. It's just everything is like there was this battle. Then the Lusitania sank. Then the United States joined the war. Then the Western Front, this happened. So
to plot it all on a map and see it sort of all happen and engage is really interesting. I also think what's interesting about this is like a lot of these countries have been formulated over hundreds of years and have sort of settled into like defensible positions based on geography. And you can see like based on mountain ranges and rivers and stuff like that. So like every front is super defensible. Right. And like it's interesting to see how it started and there were a few things that happened, but now it's just like constantly in a stalemate.
Right. And there gets to be a point where like the almost anxiety, for something to happen because human beings get bored and human beings like that. When they talked about that trek, when they sent those German spies down, that's a long ass trek, dude. That's thousands and thousands of miles through different, types of terrain, countries, cultures. So it's like, shit like that's going to fail. Like
go down there
for human reasons.
Learn a different language and convince them to fight these other folks. Oh, man.
All because, we're stuck in holes up here. We're stuck in holes.
Bulgaria wished it was bigger and was still bitter about losing the Second Balkan War. The Central Powers promised to make all of Bulgaria's wildest dreams come true if they helped, so they signed on, and together they knocked out Serbia. The Serbian troops retreated through Albania, which was neutral but had some ties to Austria-Hungary. So Austria-Hungary entered Albania in a friendly invasion to chase down the Serbians, many of whom escaped by sea. It's 1916, and a lot is happening. As if they didn't have enough enemies already, Germany added one more to the list. Portugal had been getting a bit chummy with the Allies behind the scenes, and Germany didn't like that one bit. Around the same time, the only sea battle of the war happened. Both sides had a new powerful class of battleships called dreadnoughts, but they were so expensive to build that neither side wanted to risk losing them in a battle. So they kept them in port, except for one time when they had a big fight and a bunch of them got damaged, so they didn't try that again. The UK started conscripting men to the army, so they had...
My poor little beautiful boat.
I know.
No.
I know.
That is really funny.
And it's so interesting to me, like thinking about how many fronts the war was happening on. I mean, even just like being like in the US at the time, or like being so much stuff collectively is happening all at once in this 4-year span, that to say that you were a part of the war in, like, let's say that dreadnought battle there, like that was literally an entire battle of the war, but that was one of hundreds, it's potentially thousands of things happening across the world at that time that were all part of the war.
It is interesting, like the commanders, or I'm just picturing like, oh, our boats got injured. Oh, we shouldn't ever do that again. Not of our expensive boats.
Oh no, my Ferrari.
You want to send another 1,000 troops to get mowed down in trench warfare? Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
Just like, oh my God.
I would love to see like a South Park version of their version of like World War One. Like,
oh no, my boat.
Charge! Yeah, my trench is better than your trench.
Yes.
Plenty of reserves, which is just as well because the Western Front was about to get brutal. The longest and one of the bloodiest battles of the war started when the Germans launched an attack around the French city of Verdun. The French defended it desperately, leading to hundreds of thousands of casualties. Under pressure, the French called on its allies to do something to draw the Germans' attention away. So the British started their own long and brutal fight, the Battle of the Somme, with 60,000 British casualties on just the first day.
Dang.
It was also here that the British first used one crazy brand new piece of sci-fi technology. The Russians had been getting pushed back further and further into their own territory, but in response to the French call for help, they began a huge offensive, and did really well until they ran out of supplies and got stuck. Seeing how well the Russians had been doing, Romania decided now would be a great time to jump in and win the war, and then they got pounded.
Ooh.
The Greeks were fighting amongst themselves about whether to join the war or not. The king liked the Central Powers, while the Prime Minister wanted to join the Allies. After a brief national schism, during which the country split into two, the king finally abdicated and the country reunited. With Allied help, they began a new offensive. In the Middle East, Russia was pushing into Ottoman territory from the north. The British had also made a landing in Mesopotamia to protect Persia's oil fields, and they had also sent a small army up the Tigris River to try to take Baghdad, but the army got sieged in the town of Kut along the way, and eventually surrendered. A new offensive was launched from the south with all-out desert warfare. The offensive was aided by one famous British officer, better known as Lawrence of Arabia, who helped lead the Arab tribes in a revolt that wreaked havoc on the Ottoman supply lines. By the time 1917 rolled around, everyone was exhausted.
Okay, I did hear of Lawrence of Arabia.
Yeah. I mean, that's
well
a pretty famous story.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, like, off the top of my head, I did not realize that was World War One. Technically, like, I wouldn't have made that connection without it being present in this video. I would not have connected the two timelines.
I thought it was, yeah.
I guess
it's a big movie, isn't it? Lawrence of Arabia.
It is. Yeah. What actor? What was the big actor that got their start from that? Or this is literally a recent discussion actually that I had.
I don't remember.
This is gonna bug me.
I'm sure you all know. You can let us know in the comment section down below.
Yeah.
That's the problem with Google now. Just Google it.
And isn't it amazing too, like how when Romania entered into the war and then they just got immediately annihilated, like just the difference in training and like how the difference, for example, in worth of like 100,000 German soldiers versus like that might be worth 1 million Romanian soldiers. It's that to me is very interesting how like that hierarchy of militaristic power and value to a war in terms of numbers and training matters in these events.
It's interesting too, like watching this makes me think like, whenever I would play Risk, It was always all-out warfare from the beginning.
Yes.
What if you played Risk and you had some countries that were neutral?
Yeah.
And you had some, I don't know, I just think it's interesting, all of the dynamics of it.
It's also like, isn't it like, I don't know if you do, but just like in World War II, I get the sense of like when you're looking at these like tiny countries that are literally surrounded by an entire world that sees them as their enemy, it's like, man, how are the Germans surviving this long? Like, this is kind of incredible. Like, this is kind of amazing what's happening here. Like the fact that we had to wait so long for like the Germans to make a mistake. It's kind of incredible. Like, it just, again, it just goes to show you like their mastery of their land and their like centrality, I guess.
And here we are, just...
Don't say it. Don't say it.
Chessboard keeps moving slowly.
Yeah.
There were mutinies in the French army, the German populace was starving, and the war had drained all of Russia's supplies. There was no clear winner, and it was still anyone's war. The only question now was, who was going to break first? And the answer was Russia. Tired of not eating and mad that a crazy magic homeless guy was calling some of the shots, there was an uprising in Petrograd complete with riots and strikes. The riots turned into a full-scale revolution and a new government overthrew the Tsar. Then a few months later, the Bolsheviks overthrew the new government, and they pulled Russia out of the war. This was great news for Germany, who now only had to focus on the Western Front. But there was still one problem. The pesky United States of America was looking increasingly like it was going to join the war. America had been selling supplies to the Allies throughout the war and was getting super rich off the back of it, meaning it was in fantastic shape and was dangerous to the Germans. So Germany sent a telegram to Mexico saying, wouldn't it be crazy cool if you guys attacked America? The British intercepted the message, showed it to the Americans, and that was the final straw. American troops began shipping out to Europe.
Nice.
This was terrible news for Germany, and they knew their only hope now was to force France and the UK to surrender before the fresh American troops arrived. It was now or never, so they started one final attack. They converged their troops and hit hard at the Somme and pushed the Allies back. They hit a second time further north, then again and again. With each hit, the Germans were spending more and more resources, while the Allies were getting better and better at repelling their attacks. By the fifth punch, the Allies held the line and even pushed back. With American troops now arriving in larger numbers, the Allies launched a counterattack, and that was
Game
it.
over.
The Central Powers were being pushed back on all fronts. Bulgaria collapsed first, followed by the Ottoman Empire, then Austria-Hungary, and finally on November 11th, 1918, at 11 o'clock, Germany surrendered. At the peace treaty, Germany was forced to reduce its military, accept war guilt, and pay the bill for the war. After indescribable suffering and millions dead, the world learnt its lesson and never had such an awful war again. For about 20 years.
Yep.
Man,
That was really cool.
Yeah.
And I feel like World War One gets obviously dwarfed by World War II, especially because in America, like, we got into it so late,
Right.
that it was a little less of a.
It was World War I
defining.
was definitely better from the American standpoint because we were kind of like we were in the perfect position to just like reap the benefit. We got to be the hero of World War I. Our economy flourished because of banking off of Britain and stuff. I mean, it was like the dream situation for America. We got to just go in at the end and help win.
Yeah, we made bank and then we got a little prize.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, that was really that was so fun. I'm so glad that we got to watch that.
Yeah,
I hope you liked it all too.
I really hope you guys like, especially Mike and I's reactions personally to Oversimplified, because I would love to dive in more to some of the history stuff, especially in a way where it's a little bit more consumable without going into so much details where like it's diminished returns almost. I would freaking love it. I would absolutely love to watch more Oversimplified. So I hope that gets to happen. I really do.
Let us know your craziest World War I fact in that comment section down below.
Oh, yeah.
Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything else. And check out the links in the description. With that, we'll see you next time.
Chicago Reacts.